Hi, everyone. Welcome to the live UX Masterclass by UX Academy. Welcome. We're going to wait for a few more people to join before we kick off, but you're in the right place. We're going to have one of our teachers at UX Academy is going to talk a little bit more about UX design, what UX design is about, why you should be learning it, why it's a great career choice. And I will also introduce a little bit about the company, UX Academy, the training company, what we do. But the focus of the session will all be about learning more about UX and UI. So stay on, hold on, and give us a few minutes. While you're waiting, please tell us where you're dialing in from. I see people are joining. So you'll have a chat. Oh, I'm on echo. So yeah, please join and add to the chat on YouTube. If you're coming on YouTube, perhaps you're accessing it from LinkedIn or from Facebook or Instagram. Tell us what platform you're on, where you're dialing in from. Feel free to add it to the chat. We'd love to see where the audience is. So I see there's people in from London here, a few people dialing in from the East Coast, someone from Belgrade, a few people from Austria, someone from Vienna, some people dialing in from YouTube on Meetup. I see someone also from Munich, wow, Toronto, Istanbul, Berlin, Amsterdam, Milan. It looks like we've got all the European cities covered there. Toulouse, France, the Netherlands. Welcome everyone. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. We're on time, but not everyone always makes it on time. So we would like to give everyone a chance to join. So we'll kick off very, very soon. Charles, if you can hear me, I need to get to the next slide. So I don't know if I need to add the slides to the show to do that. Okay, all right. So yeah, also a few more people: Switzerland, Netherlands, Portugal, Pakistan, London. Lots of people from London. Cool. Great, so let's kick off. Sorry, small technical issue with slide changing. We did test it, but that's always what happens when it's live. So yeah, so what as I just mentioned earlier, that this is the agenda. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about UX Academy, and then Jonathan is going to talk a bit more about some of the UX design fundamentals, building a UX design portfolio and becoming a UX designer. And you'll have an opportunity at the end to ask questions. So feel free to record your questions or post them into the comments section on whatever channel you're dialing in from, and we will endeavor to answer as many questions as possible. But this is a learning session. The whole point of today is so you learn something about UX design and about how you can develop your skills and career further. So a little bit about us, and I won't take too much time, but we're UX Academy. We're a London-based training company. It says 4 years, but actually it should be updated. I mean, we've been doing it for nearly 6 years now. Initially in person, and then we've mostly moved online since Corona, and that's going very well because our courses are very practical. So you work on a real project. We bring in projects from companies that need UX support. You're working a team, not just learning about user-centered design and user experience, but you'll learn how to apply that in the real world with a real company on a real project. And then you'll build that portfolio project, which you'll be able to use to develop your career further or step into UX design if it's your first time. As I mentioned, our courses are live. Nothing is pre-recorded. There's loads of free pre-recorded stuff online. You should definitely learn and watch from YouTube. Lots of great material, but nothing replaces having an expert teacher, one of them who you'll meet shortly. With a small group, as you'll see, we generally have between 7 and 9 or 10 people on a course. So the classes are very small, so you get lots of individual attention. Yeah, it's a great way to really learn with a real project when you have, a teacher who has over 8 years of UX design experience. We've taught a lot of great companies. There's a lot of great brands. Obviously, we've been around for a while, so inevitably we end up having a lot of students and people working in companies from around the world, but from a range of different industries as well. Obviously, we've picked some of the big brands that we've taught, but there's a lot of companies, a lot of logos. Some we've taught on our classes, on our beginner, some are more in advance. We did voice for a while. It's a little bit less popular, so not doing it as much. And we've done a lot of in-house to companies as well. So we've trained some large organizations like the Google and BBC as well for in-house courses. So sometimes companies want training. So we do both, really. Tools we use, so you'll be put in groups working on a real project. You'll be using Slack to communicate with both your mentor and your other colleagues, the people you're studying with in your class, in the UX Academy class, and you'll be put in a team. We use Figma, Zoom, and Google Drive for presentations. All the sessions will be recorded when you do the training. You get all the materials. We give you pre-reading. You get a little bit of homework as well, but that's really so you can develop your project. So you work on a real-world project. So that's the whole point. You don't need to install anything. You don't need to pay anything extra for software. It's all included and provided by us. We have enterprise licenses, and we manage everything from our side. Something very important is not only do you get weekly teaching, but you also get weekly mentorship. What that means is that you're assigned a project in a team of between 2 and 4 people. And in your team, you will get mentorship from one of the teachers for 30 minutes every week, which will help you, not about learning, but it's more about how you apply that learning on the real world project. So this is really important because it's not always easy to then take the work away and apply it. Obviously, you're going to have the lessons, but this is going to be even more useful on top of the lessons to develop your portfolio and to develop the project. Because in the end, you work on a real world project and you have to present this project back to the client, right? So they really want something valuable from it. They give you their time and we want them to get value. So that means that you're going to learn a lot. So these are our 2 trainers, Natalia and Jonathan. Both have significant amounts of UX design experience. They are also UX practitioners, so they're not just teachers, they're working on projects on a day-to-day basis, which is great. Yeah, they have diverse backgrounds in terms of working for different companies, both consultant and client side. So yeah, you'll get a lot of experience from them. They'll also provide the mentorship during the courses. And obviously it's a very small group, right? It's 9 people or 10 people max. So you'll work very closely with them. It's a huge difference when you're in a small group than when you're in a large group or doing something, you know, which is pre-recorded. So yes, so I think that's everything from me. Thank you for listening. I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan. He is going to talk a bit more about what it is to be a UX designer, what you're going to learn, yeah, hopefully some good career advice. But any questions that you find you want to ask, please write them down or put them in the comments, because we will have a Q&A session at the end. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Naveed. Yes, so yeah, a big welcome to everyone. So I'm super excited to be here today. I'm also glad that there's so many of you from different parts of Europe and also the world. Let's just kick off maybe with a bit of an introduction about myself and also my background and also how I got into the UX journey as well. So when I sort of began my career, I started off in, this was back in the early 2000s. So I started to begin my career in graphic design. So I started actually in the print industry, and I became very fascinated by designing for anything related to iconography. Also worked a lot with a number of different organizations, advertising agencies, and so on. Then after a while, I started to get into web design, web development, and I kind of reached a bit of a crossroads in my career because I was, I guess, at the crossroads of thinking, do I go into pure web development or do I sort of stay close to my design roots? And I'd always been very fascinated by, as well, the sort of psychology, I guess, of human beings. And UX seemed like a really sort of natural way to sort of veer into and pursue this path. So I used my design experience that helped me sort of transition into the world of UX, and here I am. So I started working for a university, actually. It was my very first sort of assignment. I'd done quite a lot of freelance work within UX for some time, but my first, let's say, professional role was within a university. And I started to support them with understanding their users better. So at that time, it was mainly students and teachers, but later it was also involved other stakeholders too. And I supported them with really understanding their learning management system. So the university I worked for had a software that they used, so all of the students basically could access all of their courses. They would have a interaction with chat with their tutor. And this was really, really interesting because I got to do the full research of understanding all of these different groups of people, how they interacted with the software. And then, of course, a lot of my responsibility was to not only understand, but also to try and help redesign the software in a way that would not only be maybe user-friendly, but also somehow engaging as well. Because with it being at a university, there was a lot of need to kind of keep students engaged with maybe some games, some also challenging coursework and homework as well. So basically, that enabled me to go into my next role where I am currently. So I work in actually a very technical company at the moment. They design products for the measurement industry. So I started off really designing software interfaces, but now I'm actually leading the overall strategy within the company, the design strategy. And a lot of my work now focuses on maintaining a design system or a pattern library. I also support with various projects where we're working on software design in general, but also a lot of my role now is more stakeholder management and helping to communicate the value of UX within the organization. So, okay, I would like to just go to the next slide. So, yeah, so maybe that's enough about me. I'd like to just go into now really what is UX design. So I think this is a great question because obviously a lot of people make the distinction between UI and UX design. So UX design basically, to make it really clear, is how, as it says here, how a person feels about interacting with a product, right? So UI, conversely, is more about maybe the things that are on the page, like the buttons, the menus, anything that maybe you have to physically interact with as a user. Yeah. So that's more the UI side of things. Whereas UX is more about the feeling you get as a user. So I'm sure all of you have kind of experienced that you've maybe been onto an app, you've maybe had a poor experience because you've been frustrated, that you haven't been able to find something that you've been looking for. So that is more about the UX side of it as well. And this gentleman in the photograph that you can see was actually the person that came up with it. He's called Don Norman, and you're going to probably hear that name come up quite a bit because he's very big in the world of UX and all things usability. But yeah, UX, as I said, is more about the overall experience. Okay, and that's where the term UX comes from. Okay. So I'd like to just maybe open up a little bit more and think a little bit more deeply about UX and really why it's so popular and why it's such a big topic today. Because you've probably heard yourselves many people talk about good and bad UX and how important it is. And it is obviously a crucial topic these days because we probably don't think about it, but we actually interact with interfaces all the time. So if we're not on our phones, we're on, for example, our PCs. Maybe also, if we look at this example here, you've got the dashboard for an in-car menu system, basically. And if we think about it, usability and UX and having things that are easy to navigate and use are really incremental in our lives. Okay. This example here that you can see with the car, I think, is also really important because whilst we need to design a great user experience and we want to make things easier, it's also really important to consider things like accessibility and safety as well. So if we're thinking about the example of a car, our design needs to be designed in a way that considers the fact that someone might be driving the car at high speed. So design needs to be pretty accessible, pretty, let's say, usable for someone who is in a car to quickly see what they need and to be able to access it. So, of course, functionality here is like a really big part of UX. Also, I think on a really positive note, what is great now about UX is it's a really exciting time to be in the field. So, of course, we talk a lot about smartphones and interface design, but now we're going into this new world of virtual reality, where, of course, we're going to have to probably consider designing for not just screens, but also VR, or let's say these virtual environments. So these I think are really exciting times to be entering the field because it will challenge us a lot as designers as well. So what maybe we learn today might change quite a bit in the future. So one thing that is going to be really important for you to consider as a designer is always being on top of maybe new trends, technology, what's happening in the industry. So one thing that I make a point of doing is always to check in with maybe news feeds, blogs, websites, whatever, where I can get information, and to always make sure that I'm aware of what is changing within the world of UX, and to sort of keep my finger on the pulse, because you'll find as you go throughout your career that as the technology changes, the way that you apply UX and some principles might have to change as well. Of course, we need to think about the way that a user navigates throughout maybe their applications as well. We need to think about interesting things like accessibility. So accessibility is really quite a large topic at the moment. Designing interfaces that are maybe suitable for people that have some kind of impairment in some way as well. So if we look at this image here, we've got an application that allows a user to navigate through a high street, for example. So designing for all of these different groups of people is also really varied, and it forces us to look really deeply and also very critically in how we design our applications or our UI. So one thing as well that we when we talk about UX and we talk about designing, we often connect it to solving user problems or user pains. However, we don't just have to consider that. Okay, we can also maybe consider that when we are designing, we need to also design for engagement as well. So a lot of applications that you might come into contact with, if you think, for example, maybe applications you use on a daily basis, like Facebook or YouTube, the way they are designed actually are designed in such a way that they really get you maybe hooked or interested to actually use that application. So you might want to scroll further within your feed to find out maybe the latest news. And also that's another thing as well, depending on where you work, you know, your needs or maybe your goals won't be just to design for, let's say, improved usability or making the user's life easier, but you will also need to consider designing for actually engagement and engaging the users to keep coming back and using that application. So as we can see here with the exercise bike and of course the screen in front, this is designed to keep users engaged with actually wanting to exercise more and improve their performance. I know also many of you also might know or might not know, but there's a sports app called Strava. So this is also designed in a way that is very visually appealing. There's a lot of statistics there that also help keep you engaged as a sports person. So this is also really critical too when we consider UX design. And of course, you know, we can also consider things that we use on a day-to-day basis. So when looking here, we've got an application for a smart home. So here we're primarily designing for simplicity. It's also engaging in the way that we have a nice set of features that are laid out that probably are also catered to that particular user. And this is also another really interesting thing about UX is the idea of customization as well, that depending on the user, we might also want to design our interfaces in a customizable way, depending on the type of person that we are designing for. Yeah. So maybe that's just an overview of UX design, but I would like to just talk a little bit about how do we work? Okay, so what do we do on let's say a day-to-day basis? So as you know, probably a lot of UX designers have to go through. I mean, we do a lot of drawing as well. However, a lot of what we do at the beginning is we do take a lot of time to understand our users, which is a really critical part, I think, of the process. So we spend a lot of time talking to our users, okay, trying to learn about their needs, also about maybe where they have problems, also what they're trying to achieve as well. So it really depends what type of maybe business or maybe company you work for, but it can really vary. So if you work, for example, in a very technical field, such as myself, the user research that I conduct is very, very different compared to probably how somebody in a business to consumer product, like, for example, Strava or Uber would do. But ultimately, we take a lot of time to understand our users. And once we have a better understanding of our users, then we can start to ideate and come up with potential solutions for how we might solve their problems as well. So designers might do any number of things. They might spend time interviewing people. They might spend time then ideating, coming up with potential design solutions. And then they also might go back and test the solutions that they've come up with users to really verify if they're solving their problems. So it doesn't mean that once you've designed a particular solution that you have the right answer. A big part of being a UX designer is to go back to the people you've spoken to, the users, and to test your designs, to test some assumptions that you've come up with. Because the testing part is really important, because if you're not doing any kind of testing or you're not speaking to the people you're designing for, then you're only really assuming, and therefore you're not doing any proper UX design work. So this communication with stakeholders, both users, the people that use your product, but also maybe people within your company, is really crucial to how we work. So a little bit about the overall process. So we tend to have something that is typically, we call it an artifact. So that would be the UI or the user interface. So typically something like a screen or a tablet and the software within that we interact with. And obviously that's the user using it. And then that's what creates the user experience. So when we think about, for example, if we think about an application like YouTube, when we open it within our phone, actually interacting with the video is the interaction. So when we click play on the video, that's the interaction that we get as a user, and we will get an experience based around accessing that video. So the experience could be, how do we find it when we are interacting by pressing play? Is the play button clearly labeled? Is it clear where to hit play? Is it clear how to pause the video? Is it clear where to skip? Is it clear where to move on? All of these things are really crucial to the overall experience. It seems like a really simple thing when we're talking about something like a video, but yet for the user and how they experience that, it's actually really important. And that's a big part of all of the things that we need to think about, is how people interact on not just maybe one level on a screen, but also on multiple levels. So what do we do in, let's say, on a day-to-day level? As I said before, just to reiterate, we do take a lot of time to understand the user. We spend time as well wireframing and prototyping. So wireframing might be any type of drawing or sketching. It can depend where you work, but wireframing can take on several forms. So in some organizations, people might sketch designs. They might even work in Figma, in a software like Figma or Sketch to do this. And then they might take those wireframes and then adapt them into prototypes to be tested with users. At that stage, it can get quite messy. I like to say that UX is not always such a linear process, because at this stage you might test your wireframes, your prototype on the user. You might discover things that need to be adjusted, need to be changed, and then once you've gone through maybe multiple revisions of that, then at that point, once you'll feel you're at a stage where it's clear, where it's intuitive enough for your user, then you might have a discussion with development and ultimately hand over the design to a software developer. Yeah. Okay, so just a little bit of a note. So as I said before, there is kind of like a process that we go through as designers. So we've got this understanding. We then, once we've understood some of the problems of our users and understand their goals and motivations, then we might want to go through and understand how they move through our application or our website or whatever it might be that you're designing for. So we might want to work on something called customer journey. So we want to know how our users actually move through our application. And then once we better understand the needs of the users, how they're going to move through our flows or our screens, then we will move to ideation. We'll, of course, maybe prototype our designs, and then, of course, we'll move to usability testing, where we actually test those designs on the users at the end. Of course, like I said before, it's not exactly linear. It's not that you start from the beginning and you go through this and everything works out smoothly. You might get to the testing stage where, for example, you need to you've got a lot of learnings from the testing, but you realize that maybe there's several things on there that don't work. So you need to go back to the drawing board, and you maybe need to create some more ideations. You might need to then go and test again. You might find as well that when you've done a prototype, that it can actually even give you new ideas. So you might discover, it's not uncommon, I would say, to discover maybe an idea that might be even better. And then you might, for example, do something that we call A/B testing, where you can also maybe have two versions of an idea, and you might want to test that on maybe one set of users or even multiple sets of users, depending on where you work. The thing about testing is it really helps us to give insights that maybe also redefine the problem as well. So when we go through the empathy and defining phase, we might think we understand the problem of our users, but when we do the testing might actually show us that maybe we didn't quite understand the problem clearly enough, and maybe we need to go back, speak to our users again, and define the problem more thoroughly, and then ideate before we test again. Okay, so it can get a bit messy, but generally speaking, the process is clear, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. However, it can really vary depending on whatever project you work on. Okay, and another really interesting thing about UX is we are not just I mean, we talk a lot about screens, we talk a lot about our handheld devices, and we've talked about VR, but we of course deal with the physical world as well. So one example I would really like to share with you is the remote control of a television. Because back probably, I mean, I'm looking at this image here on the right hand side, but of course, a long time ago, televisions were very complicated. They were very cumbersome to use. You had multiple controls. In fact, I'm quite sure that most of us didn't even use half of those controls. We probably didn't know what they even did. And the problem was that in the past, a lot of technology was designed by engineers that had a lot of knowledge about their domain. They possessed a lot of knowledge about very specific things that were close to maybe their hearts, but they weren't always designing for the user in mind. And this is, again, comes back to my original point about why UX is such a crucial topic today. Because if we look at the image on the right, you'll see that the remote controls of this generation basically are much more simple. There's only maybe a limited number of buttons there. And these have been designed in that way because the manufacturers have realized that, well, hang on a minute, we need to really be speaking to our users. We need to understand what they need. And of course, those discussions have resulted in a much more simplified version of the remote control that we see today. So again, even though we speak a lot about software, about mobile devices and so on, UX actually always affects products that are physical as well. Yeah. So even when we sit into our cars, or we take a train, or we interact with anything that is being man-made to a degree, UX is always needs to be considered. And that's why today, just because we think about digital devices mainly, we shouldn't neglect the physical products as well, because UX is also present there. Yeah. So some common skills, because I think this is a really crucial thing as well. A lot of time, people who I've worked with tend to focus very much on the hard skills. So things like working in Figma, being a great designer, a great visual designer. Those are really important skills. However, when you go throughout your career, you're going to find that a lot of the UX world, when you work as a designer in the industry, you're going to really be doing a lot of speaking to people. You're going to be doing a lot of communicating. You'll find yourselves in probably quite a lot of design review sessions, presenting your work, discussing your work with stakeholders. So it's really important to not neglect your soft skills. So things like, of course, understanding the users, but also understanding the business needs too. Of course, communicating with different stakeholders is going to be a large part of your day-to-day job. And in some organizations, you might have a really large team. You might have a larger team of designers. In some organizations, it can be smaller. So it might be maybe yourself and 2 or 3 other designers. But nevertheless, you're still going to need to communicate reasons for your design decisions, why you've taken such an approach, and also communicating with users. So communication skills are very important. Hard skills, of course, I've mentioned briefly, working with certain software like Figma or Sketch, but also understanding about interaction design, behavioral design, and of course wireframing and prototyping, which would come into working with the software as well. So whilst hardware and technical skills are going to be very important for you, these soft skills are just as important as well. And of course, I mentioned Figma. So Figma is a tool that we will be using on the course. I actually work with Figma daily within my work. I don't always spend as much time in it as I like to, but it's a great tool. Previously, I worked with Sketch, which is a little similar, I would say. I have worked with other prototyping tools, but Figma is a great tool and we'll be using it as we go along. I don't want to dive too much into the workings of Figma, but nevertheless, we will have time to talk about that during the course. Okay, so maybe we'll just talk a little bit about the roles in UX design, because I'm sure when you've been doing some Googling or some research, you've probably come up or you've probably seen terms like not just UX designer, but product designer or user research. And you're probably wondering, well, what is the difference between these roles? And I think it's good to mention that in many cases, product designer can encompass actually several roles. So if you're a product designer, for example, you might find yourself doing user research. You might find yourself doing interaction design, where you're really focused on the layout, how the page will look. maybe also the visual side of it as well, the color of buttons, maybe the way typography is arranged on the page, even content design. So in some product designer roles, you might also be responsible for working with the content, also the message, how the text sounds, what message you're trying to convey within the pages that you were designing for. So a product designer can actually be quite broad in many ways, whereas a UX designer tends to be a little bit more focused just on the two things of speaking to users, performing user research, and of course, interaction design and the interaction between various pages. You'll probably see as well at the bottom, there's a label called generalist. And a generalist, you probably don't see it advertised so much, but a generalist might be a person that is actually doing some of these roles. So there's also two more, there's service designer and front-end developer. So a service designer might be somebody who is actually not just designing for maybe digital interfaces, but also thinking about the experiences that maybe a user gets when they walk through, for example, a store, so something more physical. So if we think of maybe McDonald's and how maybe a customer actually walks into the store, they make their purchase, they pay for their purchase, they wait for their purchase. So a service designer might be doing a little bit more outside of the usual activities of UX design. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a front-end developer where you might be doing some of the standard UX design roles, but you might even be, in some cases, coding your solution as well. However, I think in most cases, you're going to find that a lot of the openings on the market right now fall into the UX designer or the product designer camp, where you'll be focused very much on research, interaction and visual design, and maybe to a lesser extent, content design as well. Okay, so maybe we can just talk about the type of jobs on the market as well at the moment, because normally you would probably start to look at startups or small businesses, which actually are very interesting to work in. So I personally haven't worked in a startup, but I do know many people that I know as friends and connections that are also UX designers, and they have worked in startups or they do work in a startup. And I think these offer a really interesting way to get experience within UX design. And the reason why they're interesting is because they're quite different to the other two. Typically in a startup, you might find that maybe there's a new product that's maybe new to the market. Also, maybe there's tighter budgets. It will be very, very fast-paced within a startup. So typically, you'll be designing things that won't always be probably so much time to always test things. But generally, startups can give you a lot of experience, and it can help you understand maybe a little bit more about the business side of things as well. And it's a good maybe way, if you have the opportunity to work in a startup for a product that maybe you feel really passionate about. It's a really good way to get experience and to kickstart your career. Maybe that the downsides, as I said, it could be very fast paced. Also, within a startup, you might find that you are actually the only UX designer. Sometimes there can be a small team, but if the startup is quite small, you might end up being the only person who is actually doing UX design in that organization. So it's just something to bear in mind, but it's still, I think, a really good experience. With larger companies, you're much more likely to work within a team of people. So you're going to find that you might work with user researchers that you saw on the previous slide. You might have people that specialize in content design. And then you might, of course, have a team of UX or product designers. The advantages of working in a big company really are that you, of course, have maybe a little bit more stability. You also know that you have many benefits. So, for example, in the company I work for, you have the possibility to have a budget for training. So every year, myself and my team have the possibility to go to some different courses or events, which is really, really good for professional development. And of course, we generally work relatively set hours. We don't have to really spend too much time working overtimes or late into the evening. So there's quite a good balance, I would say. And also, what is very interesting about larger companies is that it might not be that you're working on one product only. You might be working on several different products. So in my organization, we have a range of different products, and some of our designers also just work on one specific feature for that product because the product is so large. So in a large company, you might find that the work is just as diverse as in a startup, but you'll have a much larger team of people as well. Sometimes the only thing about working in a large organization is it can maybe sometimes be a little bit restricting, and you might find that you lack the challenge of probably working on multiple projects or working on different or working, let's say, within different industries. So if you work in a large company that is in one specific industry, maybe after a while it might get a little bit boring. But as with the previous, there's also there's good and bad things, right? And of course, the last one is freelance. So a lot of people do work freelance as well. It's also a really good option, particularly if you want to travel or you don't want to be fixed to one location. I also know some people that actually do work in a large company, but they also freelance. And the reason they do that is just because they want to add more variety to their portfolios. So they have a job during the day where they work in one company, which is maybe very stable, but they want to work on different projects in the evening just because they would like to get different experiences from different industries. And pursuing a freelance career allows them to do that as well, which is also not a bad option if your private life allows it. So to the big question of money, how much do UX designers earn? Well, this is again, it really depends where you're based. So I've seen quite a lot of you are based in Europe as well as North America. So I am actually myself based in Slovakia, in Central Europe, and I can't really compare my salary to the salary in the UK, but I would say that the best thing to do when you want to maybe consult salaries and you want to have an idea of what is a good average for your region or country is to really consult Glassdoor. Because of course this is something that you can use as maybe a measuring stick. I think it's important to know that when you are starting out in UX design, you definitely cannot expect to have the highest salary immediately. However, what I have found in my career is if you are the type of person that is quite proactive in terms of trying to change things in your organization in a positive way, or you're the type of person that can maybe seek out opportunities earlier on, this can really help you to increase your salary much quicker. So just to give you a concrete example of what I mean, in my previous role, I realized actually that there were quite a few problems with the current design system and pattern library that we had. And I suggested several improvements, and I actually pursued this, even though it was work that I did outside of my employment. I found that it actually helped my career to be proactive and seek out opportunities. And this helped me to then increase my salary within that first role as well. So being proactive helps. But just to come back to the main point of earnings, I would say that UX design salaries are still very competitive. They're definitely above average. And if you want to really, I would say, earn a higher salary, of course, you're going to probably need to consider moving to a metropolitan area like London or Berlin, or somewhere where there's maybe also more opportunities for UX designers. There's also remote opportunities for those of you that maybe want to work in outside of a larger city. I myself actually work remotely here in Slovakia, and it certainly works. But I have the arrangement with my company where we do actually go to. I do go on site whenever it's needed as well. But yeah, that's everything from my side, and I guess in a few minutes, Navid, we will begin with some questions. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was really great. I just wanted to mention about salaries as well. I know a bunch of UX designers, both in the UK and in Germany actually, and they do earn a lot of money. So you can do very well with UX design, and you know, starting, you need to build your portfolio, you need to build your kind of career set, like with any journey, but there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of people like Jonathan also doing it remotely, and it's one of the great roles that you can do remotely, work from anywhere. So I think that's also an added advantage as well. So yeah, so thanks, Jonathan. Hopefully everyone learned a lot. I see a bunch of questions have come in, so thanks. Please feel free to add more questions. We will then go through those questions in a minute. So I just want to add a last couple of things about your journey with UX Academy. Of course, we believe we are the best place, and you would be best placed to become a UX designer with us or develop your career further. We're talking about the UX UI design course, but we are also doing an advanced design course as well that will be starting later on. So yes, moving on. I think we have a couple more slides before we go to the questions, if that's okay. But let's do a couple more slides and then we'll take questions. So a little bit about what your week looks like. So as I mentioned, there's a weekly class, which is once a week in the evening, 6 to 8:30 p.m. So this is UK time, and we'll cover a number of different topics. And if you haven't got the brochure, then please put it in the chat, put your name in, say brochure, and we will send you the brochure. I believe we have most people's contact details if you've already signed up with, but we don't have it automatically, obviously, so we don't know who you are. So if you haven't communicated with us before, then please go onto our website, and maybe Charles, you can add the link to where everyone can get the brochure, and maybe Charles can share that with us, and maybe that comes online. Otherwise, we'll send it afterwards as well, of course. And on that brochure, you'll learn about what we cover during the course, experiences from other people, and a lot more about what we do and who UX Academy is. We've already talked that you'll get mentorship during the course as well, and there's a lot of fun work / project work where you work on real company projects. So you've met Jonathan. Jonathan teaches the first 4 weeks. Natalia teaches the last 4 weeks. Natalia is also great, also has a lot of experience. I think it's really cool that we do 2 different teachers, because you really learn a diverse range of knowledge from both. You can really pick both of their brains about their experiences, what they know, what they advise, how you can develop yourself in your career further, how you can bring UX into your knowledge sphere. And as you can see, we cover all the main aspects of UX and UI. There is a big focus on UX because that's where most companies are looking for people. They want you to understand UI and know UI, and we teach it. But the core competency is really around UX, and that's the kind of the technical side, which we believe is really what companies are telling us they want from potential employees. But we will cover UI as well in a good amount, so you have a very good understanding of how that works and how UX and UI interact together. Yes, and why us? As I've already mentioned, it's live, it's online. Our courses are certified, CPD certified, so that's a UK institution. If you're doing CPD courses, you get credits with our course. It's been certified for many years now. We talked about UX, as I mentioned, mentorship. You've met one of our teachers, so you know their experience, they know what they're talking about. You can pay in installments. I know someone asked, you only have to pay £199 to sign up, and then you can pay the rest in installments. We also have a finance provider as well, which the information you'll receive on the brochure. You can also contact us on our website or on the footer. I think, Charles, maybe you can also share the email address, and I've just seen that Charles has shared in the comments on YouTube anyway, because we can post on YouTube live. There is a brochure link, so you can go to our beginner UX design course brochure link, and then you'll get the brochure, or just go to UX Academy if you can't find the link, and click on beginner UX design course, and then it should be quite straightforward. Or just contact us from the website and we'll send it to you. So yes, you can use a payment plan where you don't have to pay anything up front, or there's flexible payment options. There's no interest, it's interest-free. You just pay for the course. UX Academy covers all the other costs that might be associated with it. And as I mentioned, you work on real company projects as well. Great, so now we're in for the Q&A. So this is how you can contact us. Actually, there's an email address here, so feel free to email us, training@myuxacademy.com, or Charles, thank you, Charles, charles@myuxacademy.com. Both are good. Yeah, please share the first question. So from Tatiana, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. The average age of the class. Average is kind of a little bit hard to exactly calculate because we don't know the ages of people. We don't ask people, but I would say somewhere. Yeah, I saw this question. I was trying to prepare for it, but now I'm on the spot. No, I think it's like 25 to 35 to 40. I would say is a range. It's not exclusively that, but I'm trying to give you a range. You know, I would say most people come to our course from a career. So most people, sometimes we have graduates that have graduated and they want to get into UX UI, and that's not a bad thing. But most of the people that come are generally in a career, or they've worked in a career and they want to transition, or they want to add UX to their skill set. So they're working in digital or within graphics or project or something, and they want to get more into UX. So they want to add UX as a competency on top of their existing skill set. And some people come from a really random career, I shouldn't say random, but really different career, and they want to become a UX designer, you know? So it's really a range of different people. This question I can maybe answer. I think, Jonathan, maybe you want to chime in about UX and UI and the differences. I'm not sure if I articulated it very well. But I'll just mention that WordPress, you know, that's something. WordPress is a CMS, right? It's to develop websites. That's more like if you're a developer, you might need to know WordPress. Yeah, it's not necessarily what UX or UI is about. But sorry, over to you, John.
Yeah, no. So just to maybe provide more context on that, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Aziz. So basically, yeah, in terms of demand, UI and UX, well, I think they're probably very, let's say, on par with one another, really. Certainly that's my experience. So I think that, you know, as I said before, really in let's say the presentation I gave, that the user experience is also integral to the UI or the user interface experience, but they're two distinctly separate things, right? So as we said, user experience is more about maybe the feeling, the emotions you get from interacting with a particular product or a particular service, whereas the UI is more about the things that are on the page, the things that maybe you click, that you interact with. So in terms of skills, I think both of them are really crucial to doing UX in general. So it's really hard to say if one is, let's say, more highly valued than the other, because for me, and certainly from my experience, I think they work in tandem. They work very closely with one another, and they're just as important to really be aware of in your career. I hope I've answered your question there.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yes, hopefully that answered the question. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, and thanks, Aziz, for that question. And here we have one from Ronara. I think I'm not doing well today with pronunciations. So question is, what would be the biggest benefit of our course? So I don't want to be too salesy. I think I've probably said it already, but you know, I think we have a guarantee on our website. I'm pretty sure. So we say we're the lowest UX UI design course, right? That's not a benefit, but what we're saying is we offer a lot of benefits for the value that we charge. What that means is live courses, small classes, less than 10 people, real expert UX design teachers, courses are certified, weekly mentorship, working with a real company project. If you add all of those things, very few companies give you everything that which together brings the course into a really journey that you take with us, and a lot of benefits that you just don't get everywhere. Gilroy asked about service design. We have done service design in the past, but perhaps, Jonathan, that you can talk about. I guess there is some overlap, and we will probably cover some elements. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I really like kind of terming service design as like one of the, let's say, a branch of UX. However, it is quite different in the fact that I think I mentioned it before again in the presentation, that service design is more focused on, I think maybe the example I can give is there was a really good documentary I saw about McDonald's actually some time ago. And McDonald's basically employed a consultant who went in to design the experience that people get from when they walk into the store, when, for example, they want to purchase their meal. And if you think about it, whenever you go anywhere and you go to maybe purchase something, or you go to a physical place to do anything, you have some kind of experience. And when we talk about service design, we're talking more about the experience you get as a customer or a visitor within a particular, let's say, environment that you want to go to. So I'll be honest, I haven't actually done this myself, because I work purely within design for software. So it's something that I haven't worked in, but I do know of people within UX that actually do venture out into this. So my sort of inputs on this would be, as you start your UX career, you might find that that you have maybe an interest or or maybe a branch that you'd really like to work in, and service design might be one of them. So you might want to pursue that. But that's like a very, let's say, brief overview of it. And thank you for the question. I hope I've answered it for you. Okay.
Sorry, I think I'm on a bit of a lag. I think, did you finish, Jonathan?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Maybe
Great.
there was some connection issue.
Sorry, yeah, I think I have a small connection issue. So next question from Bianca: what type of kind of companies hire for remote UX designers? As it changes, feel free to go on to LinkedIn jobs, I would suggest, and just search remote UX design, and you'll see a lot of jobs come up for this position.
I think Navid has certain problems. So can you hear me? Well, I will read the next question. How often do you hold UX UI design course? I see online the next is in January, but how soon after that would be the next one? Well, that mainly depends on how much people are interested in the course, but probably we'll hold after January, maybe 2 months after January 1. Navid, are you with us?
Yeah. I've switched across to a different Wi-Fi. Thanks, Charles.
No worries. Here's the next question.
So what do the hours tend to be? So it's 6 to 8:30 p.m. UK time. So that's once a week. And I think someone also asked about the starting date. So the next course, if it wasn't mentioned, is on the 14th of January. And then it will be every week, once a week, 6 to 8:30 p.m. on Tuesdays, so every Tuesday. Okay, so we're running out of time, so we'll just answer a last couple of questions. There's a lot of questions. So competitiveness of the job market, I think it depends a lot on your skills. People like Jonathan, Natalia, they're always getting good jobs. So if you have a lot of experience and you know what you're doing, then it's definitely much easier to get a job. And it's quite, I would say, companies can really validate if someone is a good UX designer, if they have the right skills and the right knowledge, by looking at their portfolio and the work you've done in the past for other clients, other companies. So that makes a big difference, and that's how companies tell, like, do they have the experience in this industry? Do they know how to work with these tools? So that really makes a big difference there. So we'll take this as the last question. Sorry if your question didn't get answered, but we did try to answer as many as we can. Jonathan, I don't know if you have any feedback on this question.
Yeah, I can take that. So thanks, Brandy. So I'll just read it for myself. Do most UX UI departments require both skills? Would only one of the skills lower the chances of getting hired? That's a good question. My experience has certainly been not. That's not the case. So maybe just to give you more of a context, as Navid said, when a hiring manager will be looking at you as a potential candidate, they would really want to not just look at UI skills. I mean, we see a lot of drawings and sketches in Dribble, but they will also be looking at some of the harder skills as well, the softer skills as well. They'll want to be able to see that you can collaborate, that you can work with people, that you can also be comfortable giving meetings, presenting concepts to stakeholders. So whilst showing your work, let's say in terms of a presentable format, it's also to be able to really important to be able to communicate the process that you take, because hiring managers really like to see how you think as a designer. You know, how do you solve real world problems? And that's the key, really. So I hope I've kind of answered your questions, but I would say that, again, like I said earlier to one of the other questions, having the combination of the UX and UI knowledge is just as important. I don't think it would lower your skills if you would say, well, my specialism is within UX or just UI, but I think it's really important to just be able to show hiring managers how you think and how you really solve problems. And that is also a little bit of the difference with UI, where, as I said before, UI is more focused on the screens, if you like, but UX is more focused on the problems and the process in order to give the experience to a user. Okay, so we can talk more about that, of course, in the course. I hope I've answered the question there, Brandy, and thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for dialing in and supporting us and telling everyone about the world of UX UI. It's a lot to learn, and I hope everyone enjoyed the session and learned a lot. Thank you all for your questions. And we look forward to you joining the next UX Academy course in January. If you need further information, please reach out on our website. Thank you to Charles and the rest of the UX Academy team. Yes, good evening or good morning, depending on where you're dialing in. It's certainly evening where we are. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.